Hi, I'm Stephanie Rozzo. Welcome to Nature Sketch Create's Go Out and Sketch a Dahlia instructional video. In this video, I'll be showing you how to sketch a dahlia by applying what you learned in your step-by-step lesson. You can follow along with this video even if you don't have the step-by-step lesson. Help this tiny business by clicking the like button, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and shopping for crates at naturesketchcreate.com. First, collect all the materials and make sure you're ready to go. You can go sketch at a garden, park, or your backyard, or even your kitchen table. Today I'm sketching the Dahlia Happy Days Cherry Red. Remember, this is just a sketch. It's most important to observe nature, relax, and practice sketching. Let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is figure out what you want to paint and how it's going to sit on your page. So I liked these two pieces from my plant. There's a bud and a flower head, this bloom here, and I think I'll paint it kind of pressing it down like this to kind of show the flower at a little bit of an angle. They tend to kind of sit at an angle. I think that's realistic to how the plant is. And as you can see, all the disc floret buds are almost all open here, with the stigmas sticking out here. And I'll probably put that there and then kind of overlay this a little bit. Maybe I want to be able to see the bud. I may need to take off a few of these leaves down here just to make the bud a little bit more apparent. And I'm going to go ahead and prop it up to give it a little bit more. And I'll probably prop that one down. So just kind of want to play around with it. You have a little bit of time with a plant, especially this. I don't think dahlias wilt as fast as a lot of wildflowers. So you have a little bit of time to play around with how you want it on your page. I think I kind of like that arrangement more or less. So I'll go ahead and start drawing it on, and this is similar to the transferring your image onto the page in step one of your step-by-step. So this is the drawing stage. It's a little harder for this, but you can kind of trace it by just kind of outlining it. And it might be a little bigger or a little smaller than the actual flower, but it makes it a lot easier and faster for you to get it on the page by tracing it. You can move the different parts around to help fit it on the page as well. And if you're doing this from the plant itself, not the clipping, you can just set the paper behind the plant. You don't actually have to cut it off the plant to do this at all. It's going to move it to the side. And my drawing might end up looking a little bit different. You have a slightly different view. And I want this to look like that, so I want it pretty much like that. I want to be able to see the bud, so I'm gonna just draw those in. There's a tiny little bud here. these are such small dahlia flowers, some of them get really big. These are tiny little ones. And if you don't want to include all the leaves, you don't have to, and I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm just going to include that. So that's the first part. It's getting the basic shape on, and then I have to start defining the shape itself. So this is an really rough outline sketch, and then I start drawing in the details. So I'll move my flower a little closer so I can see it, press it down kind of in the same position, and it will change. So it'll be a little different depending on where my head is, my viewpoint. So it'll be a little different every time I look at it. But for the most part, it'll be similar, the same. I mean, how hard I'm pressing down on it. And so now that I have those mapped in, I'm gonna just kind of make some darker marks to define that shape rather than erasing. It's good to practice this quick sketching method, help you be able to sketch things that are more difficult, or might be moving, or might be wilting. And you're not trying to be exact, we're just getting a quick study of this plant on the page. Just a nice representation. And anything that you observe that might be a little different that you weren't able to capture with the painting or drawing or sketch, you can go ahead and note that in the white space around here. It's good to also add any kind of observations you had, or how you were feeling that day, or how being outside made you feel if you're outside, or how sketching the plant made you feel. So I'm not going to be real exact about where these are, but they kind of build up there. You can see them here, and then they kind of spike up on this side. So I'm just going to draw in some real quick. They're kind of in a row. So it doesn't have to be exact, just an approximate representation of this plant. Just like with our sketch, we didn't get real exact with where all the stigmas were. Just getting a quick representation, so I'm just drawing a lot of little half circles. And these look different depending on what stage of this flower head, what bloom stage it's in. This is the way it looks right now. And again, just adding darker marks to define what spaces I'm actually going to keep and define the shape, because the little tracing is not that accurate. It just gives me a quick idea of where things might need to be placed. So just a real quick sketch of that bloom flower head there. And of course this is completely off, but again it gives me an idea of where things are, not an absolute. So just draw that in. Just use it all as a guide. Use some light marks if you have to get a straighter line if you want. I'm not really taking a lot of time to worry about that. Just quickly getting this in here. There's a little leaf there, so I just added that in. Move this. I like how this end of this leaf is a little dry and curls. So I'm gonna add that in there. There's a little divot there where the leaf has a little damage. And I think I like where this is at, so I'm going to add in the common name and the scientific name. Interesting thing about this is these petals here, these strap-like petals, are actually individual flowers that make up this flower head. They are slightly different in color depending on where the flower originated on the plant. So the same plant has some that are really bright magenta, some are kind of this medium magenta color, some are deep red, all on the same plant. And it's so interesting to see that. But this one's a little magenta and a little red at the same time. It's not super red like our step by step, but still has a little bit of the red color in it. So now I'm gonna go ahead and add some paint. So next I'm going to add some paint, and I'm going to use the same steps as I did with the step-by-step to paint this. And I'm going to use the same colors as much as possible. I went ahead and revived all of the colors from my palette that I saved from the step-by-step. But I do have the other paints here just in case I need something, like maybe the color's a little bit different, or I run out, or something's not vibrant enough the next day. So I have those too. So just like with the step-by-step, I'm going to start with the very light green color. I will, of course, test this out on my paper first to make sure it's right. And I'm just going to add this to the leaves and the stems and the filaries, which are these little guys here. And in this, I can see this bottom part of the flower as well. And I'm not really paying attention to the strokes. I'm just quickly getting it in. Go ahead and pick up more paint whenever you need it. Filling this in a lot like using a marker or a crayon, just starting on one side, moving to the next. It kind of moves the paint with it. And the bud has some greenish color. I'm going to add that in there. That one as well. A little more green. I'm going to clean off my brush. Oh, there's actually one little spot I missed right here. Clean off my brush, and then I'm going to add the next color we added with our step-by-step, which is a really light orange color. It's a little yellowish for these stigmas. I'll pick up a little bit more and dab it off on my towel after testing it out. And I'm just going to go ahead and add it in here. And again, not being really exact about positioning here, just kind of adding it in real quick. This is just a sketch. It's just supposed to be a quick representation of the plant. I'm going to clean off my brush. And then we're going to add a magenta color to these flowers. These strap-like petals, each of these little flowers here on the side, called a ligulate. And I'm just going to add that in, and the color is a little bit different, so this part might vary a little bit, but start the same. I should have tested my color out on my paper for a few reasons, and after I paint this in, I'll go ahead and do that. And observing this little bud, you can see there's some pink there. I'm going to add that in here as well. I'm using the step-by-step as a base, but making changes wherever necessary. And I'm going to add a little pink to the edge there. And then the stems. And mid-vein. And you can see that the stem here on this bud is not real pink. The red color is kind of here. So I'm gonna do that. Coming in there. Clean off my brush. Actually, I'm gonna pick up a little bit more and add that to the center too. So I'll just kind of go, this is dry because we're not using a lot of water on the paper. So I can just kind of go around those stigmas. It's very approximate. Just kind of dabbing my brush in there, a little dab, 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 dab. Dabbing it in. And if there's any areas you want to add a little bit more once it's dry, that's fine too. This is your sketch, so make it yours. So go ahead and do whatever you feel like you want to do to it. This is just a guide. So next I'm going to add a little bit of this medium green color, just like we did in our step-by-step. And I'm going to add it to the leaves kind of in a sparing way, leaving some of that lighter color showing. As you can see, the edges of these leaves are a little bit lighter. I'm not getting real exact, just getting this paint on the page pretty quickly. And the underparts are what are showing of this bud, of the bud leaves in my perspective. And most of it doesn't have very deep green, so try to be a little more sparing on that. Again, if you missed any colors and you want to add it in, just make sure the space is dry and go back and add it at any time. Clean off my brush. And now I'm gonna add the maroon color. And I'm not 100% sure that the maroon color is gonna fit. I think it will. I think the one I wanna keep out is the red. So I'm gonna try the maroon color. I'm gonna pick up a little bit and then I'm gonna put it to the side to make it a little bit lighter, just so I can test it out. So I have this little space on my test paper where I have this color and I can see how it looks with my other color on top of it. And I can try both levels of that color. And then I can bring it up to my flower and see if it's the right color. And it looks a little too red still for this. So what I can do is add a little bit more magenta to it. I think it needs a couple drops. And I just put 3. It might be too much, but that's okay. Try it out. See if that changed. And I can try it right on top of that same color and see if that's right. And that looks much closer. Still a little bit more magenta. So maybe I could take this, a little bit of this color and bring it over to the magenta. That I have on my palette, and then test it out. And I think that looks much, much closer. And color mixing can kind of just be a trial and error, and that looks like the right color to me. So I just took a little bit of this maroon color and added it to a drop of the magenta after adding a few more drops of the magenta. So I'll take this color and I'm just gonna add it in to the grooves and any areas that are like a little bit darker. And I'm gonna add it to the stems again as well. A little bit on the bud. Again, this is just a quick representation of this plant. I'm not trying to get exact, just trying to get a quick idea of it onto the page. I'm gonna clean off my brush and then pick up some of this darker orange color. I don't really see that in the bud and not in this bud, but it is in the stigmas. And make sure this is dry first by just kind of dabbing it. And I'm just gonna add it in sparingly. As you can see, they're not super dark, but they do have some dark areas. And that just makes it so that pops a little bit, having some dark and light areas next to each other. I'll clean off my brush. And then I'm gonna add this green, medium green color again, because I just wanna make sure that's dry. I just wanna bring this into a little bit of a greener color. Just looks a little greener to me, now that I've added the magenta over it. And then I'm also going to skip to adding a little bit of this really light orange color to the bud, because I can see a little bit in these areas here. It's kind of yellowish orange. And now I'm going to take the really dark green color and I'm going to add that to the flower head. I can add a little bit more while it's wet, and it'll kind of bleed into the area that I've already painted in. But the main concentration will stay right where you added it. If you add anything you don't really want to add, that's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. This is imperfectly perfect, just nice representation of this plant. Watercolor is transparent, so you can see underneath a little bit, but I also think it's nice to leave some of the other color for contrast. Make your image pop with just a few of these layers of paint. And it's great quick practice rather than spending days and days on a painting. Just a few hours, or an hour, 20 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever you have. I'm going to take this same color I mixed, this new color, and I'm going to add to the side here. Now this doesn't have a lot of that magenta, so I don't think it's going to change the color much. And I'm going to just add it over these petals to brighten them up a little bit. And this is a little different, the color is different, so I may have to do a little bit more to bring it to the same level here. So I'm gonna let that dry. And I think I'm gonna take this color I'm going to test it on my paper to see what it looks like. And I'm going to add it to the center because the center is darker. This is where if you have your color wheel, it might be really helpful. You might have to do a little color mixing. So again, not being real exact, just kind of adding it in. I might use that. I like this color for these really deep dark areas, and this is dry already. So I'm going to add that in. Create even more deeper level of contrast here. And I'm going to take that same color, I think, bring it over here and make it really light. Make sure this is dry. Those petals have already dried. And I'm going to add it over it because it just needs a little bit darker. And I can leave some of those lighter areas showing, give this even more contrast and make it pop. So there's some areas where the light hits it more and it's going to stay really light. Some areas that are going to be a little deeper and darker. I'm going to add the color to that. And since it's the same color, I can just add it right over that wet area there. Just to deepen it up just a little bit more. And I'm going to add a little bit more green one more time. It's because I'd like these leaves to be a little bit darker. Make sure to test it out on your paper whenever you need it. If you're not sure about how the color is going to look on your page. And you get to dab your brush off onto your towel. Again, just being real rough with the placement of this green color. Not worrying too much about where those veins are. Just kind of adding it in real quickly. And lastly, I just want to darken the stems just a little bit, so I'm going to take kind of that medium concentration color of green and add it just right over the stems one more time. Again, not worrying too much about staying in the lines or anything, just adding it in. Lastly, I'm just going to add a little bit more to darken this center area. I'm going to try this red color this time. Then you can test this out on your page first before you actually apply it. And then that really helps that flower to pop. And clean off my brush, let this dry, and move on to adding the ink. So lastly, just like with our step-by-step, we're going to define the edges with our micron ink line. This is a technique that just makes sketching a little faster, bringing the whole image together, giving it a crisp, clean look. So I'm going to start with the 005 black micron, which is the smallest tip. And I start with this so that I can figure out where I want to redefine these lines. So mostly I'm going to trace over the lines that I drew initially if I can see them. But I can also start redefining it depending on where the paint ended up. And you can start in the dry areas. This is still a little wet here in the center where I ended with my painting. So I'm going to leave that. And this is great to use this tiny one first, because then you can use it as a guide when you're drawing in the thicker lines. It's harder to change things with the thicker lines later. But you can see this line just barely, so you can change where things are with the thicker lines later. And I better just wait on this whole flower head since some areas are wet. And I'll just go through and redraw these lines, referring back to my flower and wherever the paint landed. I'm going to go ahead and write in the common name and scientific name. I can redefine and make it look nicer if I want, or I can just leave it messy. Next, I'm going to use the 01 micron, which is just a slightly thicker tip. And I'm going to write in the scientific name again, just to help it pop a little bit more. And then I'll use it on anything that's just kind of like a softer line that isn't really pronounced. So maybe these stigmas, they seem a little softer to me. The petals have kind of a hard edge to them, but some are a little softer. So I might just re-outline those petals. If there are any grooves that might need kind of a deepening, I'm gonna do that. These all just look really dark and heavy, so I'm gonna leave all those lines. And even in the bud, and I can even come back and do it later. I think some of these leaf lines are actually a little bit soft, so I'm going to draw those in just to kind of define them a little bit more. So softer or less pronounced, or maybe in the background, something that's not as deep or dark or noticeable. So, and then we'll go and use the 08 black micron, which has the really thick tip, to darken any areas that are needed. Maybe bottom here, underneath these flowers, to separate things from each other. And you don't want to put your hand on top of this right after you draw it, because it can smudge. I think the whole outside of this leaf looks pretty dark. You can use a paper to protect your image as well. I have a little bit of, looks like the green from my palette on my hand, which is leaving a mark. But that's okay. It's imperfectly perfect. I like the way it is. Just adding some more character to the painting. Again, this leaf, I'm just going to go ahead and outline the whole thing. And you can even add another line if you think they're really dark. You can add it, make it even thicker. So maybe one side of this needs a little bit darkening. You don't have another pen with you, just thicken it up a little bit. It's okay to add more. Most of this is pretty delicate, but it still has these very hard lines, hard edges. They're dark, and it's just a sturdy flower. But leaving some of those edges soft, like on the top here, on the sides, really can make it pop and feel more three-dimensional. And I like the way that ink looks, so I'm going to add in the common name. I'm just thickening it up so see it a little bit better, a little more noticeable. Don't want it to blend into the background. And you might want to do this with some of your observations. You might want to use the smallest pen, or just leave them in pencil, or bring them out with the dark, deep thick pen as well. So it all depends. This is your sketch. I'm going to use this pen to bring some of these lines up a little bit more. And it's not 100% accurate, just an idea of where those lines are. And you can make a little note here in this white area talking about that, and maybe pick up the flower afterwards and write down how many grooves there actually are in that space. Or you can even take this and redefine those grooves a little bit more, and then you don't really even see those lines so much. So there's some groove lines in here, but then there's also those thicker ones on the side, making it a little more accurate. There's lots of options. Just don't work on it too long. This is just a practice sketch. Again, don't forget to add any kind of thoughts or observations in the side here, or you can leave it white. This is your sketch, your journal, your practice. So you can go ahead and do whatever you like in that area. But whatever you do, make it your own. Thank you for joining me. Keep practicing, and great job observing your world. Don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and check out naturessketchcreate.com for future lesson creation.